Welcome to Boris FX Live, sponsored by Dell, NVIDIA and Intel.
Hello and welcome to Boris FX Live. I'm Ben Brownlee for Boris FX, and today we're going to be diving back into the world of rotoscoping and talking silhouette with Carlos Conceição from Image Engine. Now, if you're already a roto artist, things might get a bit spicy, as we're going to be asking about the current state of the industry and some of the annoying trends in roto. If you're new to roto, well, be prepared to see how integral this skill is to high-end VFX work in film and TV, and why there's still no replacement for a skilled roto artist. Now, this is Boris FX Live, so we are not just talking. We've got big giveaways from Boris FX and our friends at Wacom. And although I have a ton of questions for Carlos already, I really want to hear from you too. And here's how you get involved. Now, if you're watching on YouTube or borisfxlive.com, then you'll see a lovely little chat window just to the side of your viewer. So if you just tippity tap your questions in there, we will get to them all in due course. Now, there are big reasons to also be at Boris FX Live over and above the chat. If you go to borisfxlive.com, you have a chance to win one of our grand prizes today. And we're giving away a good load of stuff. So we have got, let's see what the first thing is out of the tombola today. We're going to be giving away a 1-year subscription to Silhouette. That is a $795 value. We are also going to be giving away a 1-year subscription to the Boris FX Suite to one lucky winner. That is a $1,295 value prize. And our friends at Wacom have given us a lovely Wacom Intuos wireless tablet as well. So if you're looking for the perfect tablet to just slide into your bag, here it is, the Wacom Intuos wireless. And look at that. That's a lovely little graphic. We'll be talking about why Wacom tablets and rotoscoping go hand in hand like two things which have hands. All right, before we move on to our show, I just want to say thank you to our sponsors as ever. So thank you very much to NVIDIA, Dell and Intel for helping to make this live stream go as smoothly as it does. Also a big shout out to one particular Dell product. Today, it's the Precision 3660 Tower. I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it until people believe me. It's a cost-effective, scalable performance in a mini tower design. It's a Dell optimizer for precision, but I like to think of things with the Thunderbolt 4 PCIe card option. It's a lovely little computer. It's a big, powerful computer. It's very teeny tiny. You'll be surprised. Thank you, Dell Technologies, for helping to make this stream possible. Alrighty, well let's get on now and have a little time to talk to our guests. So let's bring in our first one. Just a quick reminder though, here at Boris FX Live, we only use the finest of 1980s satellite technology. So there is going to be a bit of delay sometimes that we're working with. I personally stand by our decision to use this technology, and I still firmly believe it is the future. So with that in mind, we're going to bring in our first guest. We're talking Silhouette. So who better to have than one of the minds behind it? Marco Paolini. Marco, hello. You are Silhouette's product manager. Welcome
Yes, I am.
back to the show.
Yeah, really
How you
excited
doing,
about
Marco?
today's stream. Good.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Yeah, me
I
too.
looked up Image Engine, and their first order was in 2007 in June, and they purchased Silhouette version 2.3. So they've been a customer for a really long time.
Oh, goodness me. I'm trying to think when my first version was. I think it might have been version 3 or version 4. But yeah, so they've been around for a while.
Yep.
Well, Marco, it's great to have you with us. I'm sure you've got some good questions, and I'm definitely going to be turning to you for some of the big answers as well a bit later in the stream.
Sounds good.
Well, let's thank you. Let's turn to our second guest. Now, here's a man who needs no introduction. So I'm looking. No, hello. Carlos Conceição. He is background prep department supervisor at Image Engine, and in his career, he's worked on some of the biggest films and TV shows around, with recent work including such low-budget niche cult-following shows like The Mandalorian, Snowpiercer. He's also founder of the Rotoscoping project, which we'll be discussing a bit later. So Carlos, it is my pleasure to finally welcome you to Boris FX Live. Welcome, Carlos.
How's it going? Can you guys hear me?
Oh yes, loud and clear. No, it's great to have you on the show. It really is.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invite. I think it was a long due chat. I remember the last time that I had a chat was a few years ago on one of my podcasts as well, with Ross, and talking about many things, Mocha, Silhouette. Like it was a lot of good stuff. Always good chat with the development team. I think it's such a nice point of view, listening to what you guys that develop the softwares have to say about this. So thank you so much for having me on your show.
No, that's great. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we should definitely underline here is that that with Boris FX, the conversation is always two ways. So that's kind of what I like with this sort of product development, especially for something that is very artist driven, like like Silhouette and Roto. But I mean, before we get into that, because I do have like a lot of spicy Roto questions for you. Can we just sort of talk a little bit about you for just a moment? Because your journey to where you are today is actually, it's a bit of a dream path for many Roto artists. So, I mean, can you just like tell us a little bit about how you started with VFX?
Sure. I pretty much didn't jump any steps. I studied to be a software engineer, but I didn't really like to be a software engineer, to be honest. I hated programming. I hated that everything was so much set in stone. Like we didn't have much creativity on how we could go about things. It was just about what we had to do to make that algorithm work. So I had contact with CG and the friend that was working in ArchViz, and I've just fell in love instantly. It was 3ds Max and V-Ray by that time, and it was all about doing architecture visualization. So by doing that, I got contact with the CG world and also with the compositing world, and I felt that after 5 years of doing CG, I had to focus on the other side. I was having a lot of fun, which was just the post-production and making that last step of the CG to look really good. I felt that I had very little information about that, so I went to London, went to Scape Studios, studied compositing, and started my career at DNAG. And as what? Roto artist. Well, everyone wanted not to be roto artists and wanted to believe that they could be compositors out of school. I felt that I really needed to have that background and started as a roto artist, as a junior roto artist. So I've made my career progressing from the trenches. There was no glamour out of that. It was long hours and tough work, and trying to learn the ways through. So roto, prep, and then eventually became a compositor. So recently I decided, because I've been always involved in training. This is my passion. From the times of doing CG, I was always training at schools and helping people to progress. So I felt that for me to have the biggest influence was with the younger generation. So I decided to return to Roto Paint again, and spend my time inspiring people and helping them to learn the ways. And I do believe Roto and Paint are the basic foundations for a good compositor, or even if you want to follow Roto Paint as your career for the future.
Well, I like to think of like there are some very, very core effects, some core skills that every artist should know when they're coming into VFX. Roto and Paint being two of those. What do you consider the skills that Roto actually teaches you? Even if you're planning into moving into a different area later on.
I usually say that teaching Roto is an excuse to teaching everything else. I usually start by explaining people where is our place in a visual effects pipeline, and that includes having a profound knowledge of whatever is happening surrounding you, all the other departments in the visual effects pipeline. So as a visual effects artist, you shouldn't know just about your department, but you should be comfortable in understanding to a certain degree what is happening with all the other departments. So that comes with just the initial explanation. Then I do believe, and a lot of people don't agree with me, but I do believe that starting to learning Roto is fundamental, especially to train your mindset. It's a lot of stuff that we do in compositing sometimes have to be frame by frame, has to be tough, delicate work, painting edges and fixing little things. And people just think that what you can do in compositing can be all procedural, and you just click of a button and you can have it done straight away. And it's not like that. For you to be an absolute complete compositor, you need to know how to fix your edges. You need to know how to fine tune, even if you have to go frame by frame and do something that is a bit more meticulous and a bit more brute force. You have to learn how to be on that right mindset and not be afraid of that, or else you won't be able to deliver your shot. So that's for me what I take from teaching Roto. And also photography is like, for you to fully understand Roto, you have to fully understand photography. And it's again another excuse to teach everything else that surrounds visual effects, not just Roto, not just compositing, but everything that surrounds it. For me, always start with explaining what media do you have in there, understanding what motion blur is, understanding how that image was captured, and how can you interact with that image. So it's all about excuses, excuses to teach something else to make that artist a bit more complete.
Yeah, and I think motion blur is a huge topic that I think I'm going to ease us in there a little bit. I don't think we should jump straight into motion blur right now, but I think you're right. There is a certain mindset, a certain meticulousness, a certain way of problem solving as well that Roto is a great way to teach, or a great way to learn. In any case, what would you consider that the core skills for every VFX artist to know would be then?
In starting starting for what department. It kind of the changes from department to department. For me, in terms of the compositing side of things, the 2D side of things, it's all about detail, observation. It's like looking around you and figuring out how things look. Sometimes we look at the sky and we feel like, oh, this is a Photoshop sky, but sometimes the Photoshop skies actually exist, and this is why it's so important for you to look in your surroundings and get informed of how can you perceive depth. How can you understand what is happening with the reflections, or how things integrate and how shadows combine with each other? So there's so many different things that are important. But for me, it's all about that search for absolute detail. I usually say that for me, the best candidate for being in my team is someone that is slightly obsessed with quality. You know, when you need to ask someone to stop, and that is good enough, and they still want to carry on because it could be better. I think that's the fundamental quality for you to succeed as a visual effects artist. You need to be criticizing your own work, because you're going to spend the rest of your life being constantly criticized, and you cannot take it personally. You know, you have to take it as, this is for the best of the shot, and we are all trying to get somewhere with this. And I might not be just my vision that will take us to that final stage and what the client ultimately wants with that shot. So, yeah, that's the fundamental side of it.
Yeah, that's it. I think one of the things that I really like and I really respect about you as well is that desire and that passion to teach and to actually share knowledge with other people in your team, but also, you know, the next group of people coming down. Like how important is it for you that in your team there is a sort of knowledge share rather than people just keeping tricks to themselves?
I think when you realize that when you are sharing something with someone, you're not really teaching them all of your tricks. You are trying to bring them with you, and for you to be able to teach something, that means that you're already in a different stage. One thing is for you to know how to do it. The other thing is for you to know how to teach it. You know, it's not like the best artists at doing something. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are the best teacher. You have to know how to pass that information, how to be passionate in inspiring someone to do it, and don't feel like some of the people that we have some questions in the chat saying like, oh, this is so painful. Everybody hates to do Roto. I do believe that it doesn't have to be like that. I know I have people in my team that really enjoy to do Roto. I have people in my team that just want to do Roto. And it can be something really interesting for you to do. It's just that depends on what is your mindset. Like, how do you look at Roto from the artistic side? Is like, I usually say, everyone, you can teach a monkey to do Roto, but a monkey will not be a Roto artist. So doing it has an artist. It has a puzzle side to it, that if you like those puzzles, you're going to be able to succeed. And in terms of training, for me, like, I have a weird feeling when I see people starting to flourish and enjoy doing this. And for me, it became, after a few years of being in this industry and doing a bit of everything, it became my goal. Is like, what gives me most pleasure right now is to teach people how to get there. And I usually say that, like, the guys that I've taught, they became better than me. You know, it's a weird effect, but I'm not afraid of that. You know, I'm not afraid of that someone that I'm teaching to take it to another level and be definitely faster than me at doing it. So as long as I can keep inspiring people in coming into this industry and succeeding and enjoying doing it and contributing and working with me, that's the best part of this, right? Making new friends.
That's it. I mean, like, taking just to like a little step back though, I mean, you've been in the industry for quite a while now. Like, have you perceived it changing, like over your career, and sort of, maybe being a different beast than when you joined?
Many things have changed, to be honest. Especially in the conceptualization of what is a 2D department. Is like back in the day, we would start in Roto and Paint as a stepping stone to be a compositor. I still believe that it's the best stepping stone and it's a fundamental one. But right now, you see a lot of people that want to make this as a career. They want to be roto paint artists. Meaning the main difference that roto paint is Boolean. It's like either it's good or it's bad, and compositing is very subjective. You can have 3 or 4 or 5 different people looking at the same shot, and some like it, some hate it. So there's a lot to take with that. But I do believe that is like one of the biggest changes that has been happening recently, with Roto and Paint going mainly into outsource places, and like the amount of work just growing exponentially. So people have just decided that they can actually make this as a career. They can enjoy doing this because it's very fulfilling. Other than that, well, guess what? Remote work is what changed the most recently, yeah. Right? Before we were all at the offices, and that's it. Right now, majority of the people working visual effects is at home, and the client had to adapt, the industry had to adapt, and it's quite interesting where we're going, to be honest.
I mean, those change. Let's stick there a second then. I mean, what benefits did you notice from these new workflows over and above people being able to, or having to work from home?
Quality of life, I would say. We are still not there fully, to be honest, since we are still having to work from, depending on where you're working from. But most of the times you still have to be within the city or within the region to be able to still work from home. It's remote, but it's remote through the region. But I do believe that this allowed us to have quality of life. I believe that a hybrid work is kind of the best thing. I've been through 100% remote, and I hate it. I absolutely hated it. And now I make an effort, and all my team to go to the office once or twice a week. It's not mandatory, but it's something that we've implemented and we absolutely love. Keeps our engagement as human beings. It's completely different to be in a meeting with 10 people, with 8 of them with the camera turned off, and being live, being with someone and having to talk, and sometimes just that small talk, that's not necessarily work related, but keeps us engaged as a team and as human beings. So I think we've gained a lot more flexibility with this remote work, and I do believe that this middle ground, not so much as before, not so much as 100% remote, but that nice middle ground, it's I think where we will find happiness and the best quality of life.
Do you think that's going to be sustainable? I mean, that's it. I mean, do you notice that there's a growing pressure to sort of be back at the studio, or is this hybrid workflow actually settling into becoming the way forward?
Well, let me give you an example. A lot of people are finding right now that we are even more productive at home than we were at the office. Me, as a head of department, I have sometimes 10 meetings a day, back to back to back. It would be physically impossible to actually do 10 meetings back to back to back with different teams, with different shows. It's just impossible. So working in a remote environment allowed me to actually be more productive. For me, the side that is lacking is that interaction with the talent, with the junior artists. How do the junior artists learn, as I did back in the day, by just looking behind? And I had like a Victor Perez behind me, and I could ask him a question as like one of the masters of compositing. And I had the luxury of just asking him, or asking someone next to me, a colleague that just started, can you show me how you're doing that? We're going through the same problems. Right now, we have to force this. We cannot be constantly creating a meeting to deal with these things, right? So I think, again, it's sustainable. It's proven that we're already doing it. All the companies in the world are doing it. And I think the ones that are not, it's quite weird, right? It's like they're struggling with something that shouldn't be a problem right now. Everyone has adapted to this. Everyone has proven that it's possible to work remotely. And now is finding that balance with the quality of life, and also the human interaction, which for me is quality of life. An extremely important part of this. I'm more sociable guy than some of the people that I know that don't really want to go ever to the office, but I do. I find that extremely valuable.
Yeah, we're definitely not seeing the demand for Roto going down, are we? I mean, from everything that I've been told from my Roto friends, like the demand has just shot up in recent years. Is that a trend you're seeing as well, and why do you think that is?
Do you mean it's growing or decreasing?
Yeah,
in your opinion,
growing. I think it's growing.
Oh, it's growing. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's growing. Yeah. It's since I started this career, we are doing now maybe 10 times more Roto than we're doing before. First, because we're doing more shots, and now with the streaming, we're doing more shots, more shows with the same quality as film as we were doing before. And also because it became a bit more clear that on set they cannot lose so much time in setting up perfect blue screens. The environments are huge. And they don't have time to set up proper blue screens, proper illuminated blue or green screens. So a lot of the work has become just Roto everything, Roto everything, Roto more than Roto less, even because there's a shortage of artists, shortage of compositors, so they cannot lose so much time in spending 1 week trying to key a shot with a million different shades of green. So it ended up being that as Roto artists, we have a lot more demand to do this kind of work. So it's by any means going away. It's staying, and it's staying for a long time. Not even the AI tools are saving people from. People believe that they will save, but for now, to be honest, you have to do it. You have to do it.
All right. Then you touched AI. Let's go there for just a little bit.
Touch the wound.
Okay. No, it's not a wound. It's something that people are genuinely and very, very interested in. Is AI the end of Roto? And this is probably something that Marco can join in as well.
Please.
We've looked at different solutions and done testing on our own, and there's a certain amount of automation that's nice to see, but we feel that at this point, the kind of precision that our customers require and need, and that their clients require and need, is just nowhere even near what's needed. And the shots that we see our customers doing are incredibly complex, with a moving camera, a moving foreground object that they're trying to isolate, with moving objects in the background as well. So it's just incredibly hard to get the kind of results that a human can get. Now, if somebody's sitting in a chair and there's not a ton of hair detail and they're not moving much, you might be able to get a draft result that you're happy with. And I think most people who have tried the AI tools that are out there know what I mean when I say, you might be able to get a result that's 60-70% there, but the amount of time it takes to fix that is longer than it would take than if you just started from scratch, created the shapes the way you wanted to. And I think it's, at this point, it's far more important to have a really good tracking solution to automate or semi-automate your rotoscoping. So I mean, that's kind of what we see at the moment. And I think if you look at all the AI tools, not even just for Roto, it produces a quick result, but it's like, how do you modify it to get it to where you really want it to be? And I think that's where the difficulty is right now.
I mean, where do you fall on that then, Carlos?
Absolutely agree. And I've tested a few of these AI tools. I've tested them 5 years ago. And in 5 years, to be honest, I haven't seen a significant change that makes any of these solutions that are in the market usable in a production environment. And I mean, they can be used if trained properly to do just a garbage roto, just simple mats that can be used for just showing to the clients, like temp keys, temp roto. That is what I see that this can be used, and several companies are using it in that way. But even though they are trying to use it, there's still tons of problem on how do you train these models. Like, what do they detect? They detect objects, they detect people, but they cannot separate people. So it's very simple when we have just a person in the front and a car in the back. What if I have 20, 30 people and I need to separate them in several layers and between them to put effects in the middle? There's tons of issues, just by the separation. I'm not even talking about the quality, because until now I haven't seen a single shot that actually follows an edge and doesn't boil. And the problem with these AI tools, and I agree with Marco, is like with all of the solutions we're seeing right now, nothing is editable. With splines, I can change some things. Though we spend most of our time giving notes, changing things, asking for people to change an edge. And by an edge, I mean sometimes half a pixel. This is the level of detail that we need. We need absolute consistency, temporal consistency, local consistency, and none of the AI tools is available because they produce a mat, and I cannot paint a mat. I cannot ask an artist to just, can you fix this mat by painting it? Because certainly the tools are still not there to the point of like just selecting a region and making, can you just go further with this region around here and make it look even better? It's not possible yet, like in the future. Sure, like let's say in 5-10 years, maybe we can get a bit closer. But I do believe that Roto is kind of the last thing that you should start in terms of AI. It's way easier to start with things that can be done with text. For instance, compositing all the nodes and even Maya, everything can be translated in text. If you can translate it in text, if you can script it, it's much easier. As you have seen, like ChatGPT, it's much easier for you to lay down a script and like in a most programming style, other than just looking at an image and judging if an edge is perfectly aligned, the position for that motion blur to work is perfectly aligned. It's very, very, very complicated. I think people are overseeing this, and when they say that Roto is dead, I've seen so many situations in this, and like LinkedIn recently, people claiming that Roto is dead. They can only claim that because they've never done it. If you've done a week of Roto, 8 hours, you know what we're talking about. It's not the right thing to start with. It's something that will certainly save a lot of time when it's done. But right now, it's not production ready. Any solution. I haven't seen any solution yet. And then we enter in the problem of how do we train models? How do we get permission from previous shows to train the models for the next show? It's a very difficult territory, to be honest. It's a big challenge, and it's something in development, right? But meanwhile, it's in development. We have thousands and thousands of shots to do to perfection. We cannot afford to be just living in this dream of a time that we don't have to do roto. It's like right now we have to do it. We have to do it very efficiently and thousands of times. So I'm all into finding solutions to simplify our current work, the present work, and also, for sure, look into the future. And I do believe you guys at Boris Effects can actually have the solution to help integrate AI into the tools and still make it editable. That's what I strongly believe.
No, that's I think like I think as far back as I can remember, automated roto has been 5 years away, and it doesn't matter at what point in my timeline.
Exactly.
Automated roto is always 5 years away. But I would like personally, I'm looking forward to the day when we do have like a fully automated roto system. Today's not that day, and there's still loads of shots that need to be pumped out today.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine a situation, Ben, and where we are breaking down the splines, and this can be in several keyframes, and Silhouette has the capability of actually using AI to understand, like with the breakdown that we were given, lay down those in-betweens, that animation, and still keep those splines editable. So I do believe that there can be AI integrated in the workflow that still maintains the editability of these techniques. So I think we can integrate it. I think we're just looking in a different perspective. We're looking in the wrong way. You need to look at in the way of the people that actually do the work and have to QC the work, because that's what we do every single day as supervisors. We have to QC the work. We give notes. So how do we address this problem? Is it has to be done within the software.
Well, I've got like one more question before we take a little break and give away some prizes. And I think we'll just sort of like take a little step back again and just look at Roto as a whole. Like from your point of view, do you need to learn Roto in a specific program? Do you need to start with Silhouette to learn Roto?
I think that is very simple to answer. I'm a complete software agnostic. I do believe that theory is agnostic. I can train anyone to learn how to do Roto without even touching the software. But then there's a problem, which is productivity. It's like, how do you do Roto fast? It's only one way. You have to use the software that gives you the fastest results, the best accurate results, and that maintains the mental health of the artist. And that software is Silhouette. I've done it in multiple softwares. There are some proprietary softwares in some companies that are really good, but because they are only proprietary to one company, they can only be used in that company. So having to look into what is the standard of the industry and what we all do, there is no such thing compared to what Silhouette brings to the table in terms of doing Roto, And I do believe you should use the right tool to the right moment. There are things that I do in Silhouette. There are things that I don't do in Silhouette. But Roto is guaranteed 100%. You have to do it in there. You have to learn it. If you're not learning it,
that's really gratifying to learn. Yeah, no, that is really gratifying to hear, because I was the same sort of mindset as well. Like the fundamentals of Roto can be learned anywhere, but actually if you're sitting there doing it for 8 hours a day, you want to be in the most productive place for it. And in my experience, I mean, I've only been with Boris Effects for a few years, but I've been using Silhouette for many years, and the reason for that was it was the most productive bit of software for me.
Guaranteed.
I have been I've been very vocal about that throughout my career as well.
It's
Ben.
Let's. Oh,
I was
sorry,
just
Marco,
going to put a button in the AI discussion. We're always looking and doing R&D for future tools, but in the meantime, concurrent with that, our focus has always been to provide really good manual tools to fix those shots, to cut down on the amount of button clicks. And over the last 17, 18 years that we've been making the product, where the product is now is a result of direct input from artists like Carlos and many others from different companies. So it allows us to have a really good depth of knowledge coming from those artists, and again helps us to focus on the tools to help get those shots done as quickly as possible with as few clicks as possible. So that's kind of our general philosophy right now.
One of the things that I'd like to add is that it's all about the financial consequences as well. Whenever you choose, and this applies to many things that we're going to discuss today, maybe in the second part of the show, is that sometimes people say, "Oh, I prefer to use this," or "I prefer to use that," and we have to be very, very careful with the consequences of "I prefer." Because are those is that preference just something personal, that you like this software because you like the interaction a bit better, or does that translate actually in productivity time? So if you say that, "Oh, I prefer to use this software, but it takes me 3 times the time to do it," can you actually prefer that software? Are you even allowed to do that in a production environment? You can do it at home for sure, in your personal projects. But in a professional environment, are you even allowed to say, or to come to your producer and saying, "You know what, this could take 5 days if I do it in a package, but I actually prefer the other one, but takes me 15 days. You don't mind, right?" And the producer is going to tell you straight away, "You are out of your mind." It's like, I need you to do this in the smallest amount of time, the one that is cheaper for us, because our clients are also quite tough on the bids that we do. So it's a very difficult discussion, like personal preference versus productivity. That's where I usually lay all my training and all my decisions, and I keep putting them to tests year after year. It's all about productivity. As long as you talk about money, things go in a completely different direction.
Yeah, I know we'll definitely come back to this in a moment, because I think because you've hit the nail on the head at that point as well. We're going to take a very, very quick break. Thank you, Carlos and Marco, for the first little section there. I've got a ton of questions I can see on the chat that I need to start to sort through and prep for the next time. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you very much for watching Boris FX Live. If you're enjoying this discussion of Roto, then there's one really good way of showing us that you are. That's hit the little thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. You'll be all the happier for it, because as soon as you do that, there's going to be confetti flying everywhere. It's going to be great for you. Another thing you can do, obviously, is subscribe to the YouTube channel. But if you're more of a Discord person, well, congratulations on you. We also have a Boris FX Discord channel that we have. And so you know what to do. That little QR code that's over here, it's not over on the other side, it's over here. That little QR code is going to be all you need to know to join Discord. All right. Well, while that's sat there for a little bit, we'll be back. We'll be back, QR code. Let's give away some stuff. Brian in Mission Control, do we have our first winner? Because someone is going to be walking away from today's live stream with a Wacom Intuos wireless tablet. It is the perfect tablet to stick in your bag and take anywhere you want. It's a lovely little Bluetooth number, completely wireless. I've got one myself. I do like it. That's the one I take to the beach when I need to do a bit of rotoscoping on the beach. And that's going away to one lucky winner who joined us on borisfxlive.com. And that winner is Bill Kinnan. Congratulations, Bill. You have won the Wacom Intuos wireless tablet. Oh, well done. Well done to you. Oh, yeah. All Bill had to do was go to borisfxlive.com, scroll down to the bottom of the shot of the screen, and tippy tap his details into the little window right there that we're seeing on this beautiful screen. So if you want to win any of our other prizes, then you should do the same at borisfxlive.com. We still have a 1-year subscription of Silhouette to give away to one lucky winner, and we have the big boy, the Boris FX Suite. That's a 1-year subscription. That is everything that we make, including Silhouette, including Mocha Pro, Sapphire, Continuum, and Optics. Everything in one funky bundle. And we're going to be giving away a 1-year subscription to a lucky winner. Go to borisfxlive.com. Alrighty, I think I've remembered all the things I needed to do there. Let's head back to Carlos, because you've got some stuff that you want to show us, I do believe.
Yeah, we have. How many hours do you have?
We've got 6 to 8 hours left on the stream, more or less, give or take. Let's see how we get. I'm gonna, while you're showing us this, I will be peppering you with questions. I just want you to be aware of that. So I'm gonna keep firing stuff at you.
I'm just joking. This I usually say that for me to teach someone how to roto, you need at least 10 weeks. It cannot be done quickly. But what we can do, because maybe majority of our audience already knows what is roto, but for me the most important thing is to focus on the key factors for this productivity and for the understanding. And usually there's a lot of controversy in several topics when people are discussing how to do roto or what to choose. Recently, I've seen, I think it was yesterday, on LinkedIn, someone saying, I was like, oh, you should use Béziers instead of B-splines, and like with an essay about why you would prefer one to the other. So there's a lot of strong opinions in regards to many things that has to do with roto, and also what software to use. I would like to quickly focus on 5 key principles, and what is the pitfall, usually like the best topic, the perfect topic to address into one of these. And we're gonna just literally scrub the surface of these pitfalls, and hopefully that our audience can understand a bit better how to deal with these problems, right? So,
like it. If you already got my blood boiling, I'm looking forward to this.
Let me see. Can you guys see my screen?
We can. It's perfect.
All right. So, talking about productivity, let me just quickly show you something that I've been using recently, which is. Let me just go back and not share my screen. But if you see my image right now, I'm using this hardware controller. It's called Toolbox, and recently I've been using this exclusively with Silhouette. Like, this is a little almost like a MIDI controller. If you are into DJing, you'll understand what that means. But this pretty much is a bunch of buttons, a bunch of wheels, as the same way that you use your Wacom tablet, and it has some buttons for you to press. This thing here is kind of the Silhouette of the hardwares for editing and all of these visual effects tools, right? So I'll show you a bit more if we have time a bit later, but just to show you that I'll be using a lot of this to work on my shots. Okay. So going back to sharing my screen, I got you guys some examples here of of stuff that I usually go through when looking at the shot. Being the first key principle, the observation, having a game plan to go through. And by game plan, I mean, let me just let me load this, get this into memory, and I'll show you what I mean.
Carlos, what size image do you typically work on?
Recently, 4K. 4K is the absolute standard for the majority of the stuff that we are recently using, especially streaming. Everything that is Netflix, Disney Plus, Apple, it's 4K ready. Back in the day, it was more about film, and film was 2K. And now things have changed. So 4K. So I brought you guys a 4K plate. Okay, so let me focus on this Grogu here. It's like if I'm trying to look at this shot and I have to roto this. Again, it's not like an example that I would probably use, because we could luma key this if we wanted to, but this is a training example that I use to show people what is roto and what they should focus. So for me, what the observation that I have to do here is going to be like, how am I going to tackle this? Where am I going to start? And that all starts with us moving the shot backwards and forwards and trying to understand where parallax is. And parallax is pretty much depth in motion, right? So if you look here, I can see that whenever I'm rotoing the edge of the head of Grogu, if I scrub through, this edge is going to completely change in shape through time. And the first thing that people, when we talk about roto, people think that we start rotoing by just putting a spline across the whole thing, and then frame by frame we're going to be changing this every single spline, every single point throughout the frame range. And this is the first misconception about roto. Roto is not about that. Roto is about dividing this in as many shapes as we need to simplify our work, in the sense that we can move the splines individually or as groups of splines and try to sort the whole shot in the less amount of time. Okay, and what I can see here clearly is that there is definitely at least three levels of depth that are happening here. There's definitely these little bumps on the forehead. And then there's like an intermediate level where I see another two bumps over here. And then there is the back of the head, that edge over there. So this is what I consider revealing edges. And for revealing edges, we need to use revealing splines, okay? We cannot just take this as one big spline and go through it. We have to definitely divide this in whatever makes sense. So this is all about the observation. This is exactly what I was talking about. The other thing that I usually try to observe is like, what level of motion blur do we have here? It's going to be like a heavy motion blur? Is it going to be a normal motion blur, or almost no motion blur? So this thing here with this little ear moving, it's barely has any motion blur. There's just a little bit of softness. So as an artist, the first thing that I would do is try to figure out, how was this shot? Be curious. Ask yourself and look into the metadata of your image and ask, how was this shot? Because I shot this picture, and on purpose, just to have the most detailed and sharp edges, I've used a 90-degree shutter. So I know that this is going to have minimal motion blur, because the first exercise I usually try to ask people to do is manual roto. No tracking, just manual roto, and try to follow those edges, break down those splines, okay? So the observation goes there. I would try to understand how to break down these edges. What problems do I have here? How do this cloth is going to move? Definitely organic stuff happening here. and another revealing spline with this cuff and the hand going in front of everything. So again, I'm seeing depth here. I'm already thinking, how am I going to divide this into splines to be able to tackle this problem? I'm definitely not going to draw a spline over here with all of this detail and then having to change it constantly. That's definitely not going to happen. Okay, this is why Roto can be an art. It's like trying to find the puzzle. Okay. Now, the second stage that I usually try for people to understand is starting to break down. Okay, is use that observation that you've done and start breaking down those splines. Okay, and the question that comes here and that we've been approaching is, what kind of spline are you going to use? If you have to break it down, you have to use some kind of spline, right? So let me bring a Roto node. Let me connect here, and let's start with the classic Bezier, right? Which is like what I consider like the old school way. The OGs used Beziers because there was nothing else back in the day when Roto started and to be like a digital art. There was nothing else apart from Bezier. So what happens with the Bezier is, if you ever done it, let me just go back. I'll delete this. Already started wrong. What you start is that you start laying points on the edge and then using these handles to basically shape the direction, the tangent of what you are doing. Okay. And usually people go and saying, oh, Beziers are so much better because I can use less points. Okay. And that's usually the selling point, is saying Beziers are better because I can use less points. Well, Beziers have one big problem for me, and it's this. Whenever you select the spline, all of your points, all of your handles, they are just literally over the edge. And for me as a Roto artist, I want as little as possible. I want my spline to be there, but I don't want any handles to be in front of that. Okay. And there's another thing. There's too many things for you to move. There is the point. There is the handle. Whenever the handle is synchronized, let's say left and right, and then you can move just one handle, and you can even break that handle and move just one side. Of course, this will give you a lot more flexibility, but is it really needed to be that flexible? It's like, is there any chance that I would be doing this kind of spline around here if I wanted to distribute this? Would I ever be doing this that I'm doing right here? By any means. I would never do this. So again, whenever someone is trying to explain to me why a Bezier is so important, because you can do like big splines with less points, it's pointless because I don't use it that way. Okay, so let's think about B splines now. So let's start with the normal B spline. B spline has a really interesting capability. They're also called natural splines. So let me show you. I use a B spline, and guess what? The way I control the spline, my control vertices, my control points are not really on the edge. Look at this. I can describe the same spline that I had before in much less time, and nothing is really in front of this. It's just that edge over there. Okay? That's pretty much it. And arguably, sure, if you have to describe big areas with the B-spline, if you have to do this, maybe here on the inflection points, you would definitely have to use like 3 points for every inflection if you are doing like a normal B-spline. But there's a good thing about B-splines as well. Well, not so much about B-splines as it is. I think you guys will see this as default, the way they come in silhouette. I can choose one of the points, and I can change the tension on these points, okay? And you can change how that interacts by just right-clicking, and you can choose which kind of interpolation you have around that. And the B-spline, you'll see, it will start changing everything around as well. The adjacent edges are gonna be being changed as well. As soon as you start editing this, oh, not this. This is something that I don't really like, which is feathering. But you see there's a lot of change happening here. What I like to use instead of B-splines, I like to use the X-splines, okay? Something even more interesting, okay? That allows me to do something like this. Let me just put this back into place. I'm using an internal edge to just exemplify this, but you can use pretty much any edge, okay? So what this X-spline allows me to do is to do this. I can pretty much make it even a corner, okay? So there's no longer need to say like, oh, like Béziers gives me so much more control because I need to use too many more points to describe things. Well, here you no longer need, okay? If you use a different shot like this one here, let's see if I have already a spline over here. Yeah, I do have. Let's see. Look at this. So if I try to edit this spline, look at how many points did I use. These are usually the critical selling points for not using B-splines. There's only 1 point here, okay? There's only 1 point because the tension was changed to be sharp around that edge. So I no longer need to use a Bézier with all those tangents in front of me. I can use a more natural spline, more easy moving spline. Because the actual tensions can be changed. Okay, so there's no more problem with this. So the selling point is pretty much sorted in terms of what to do. Okay, now any questions? Sorry, I'm talking here, Ben and Mark. You might have questions.
No, there are always tons of questions, but you sort of hit the nail on the head. Like Bézier splines, especially when you start animating. It's not a single point. It's always 3 points that you have to worry about at some point. So, too
much control, right?
It's too much. You might even get something looking good on a single frame, but we know that's not what Roto's about. Roto's not about a single frame. It's about the shot.
Exactly.
However long that shot happens to be, and it's about how that animates together. I'm glad you're another X-spline king, though.
Exactly. And the problem is sometimes people think like by you dividing something in several splines, that means multiplying the amount of time that you have to deal with it, because they do believe that, okay, it's another spline that I have to animate. And now what if I animate this one and then the other one I animate it and they don't match the keyframes? So they will start conflicting with each other, right? This is why whenever we break splines, we always move them all together. If they have the same parallax, we track them together. We put them in the same layer. We move them together, and then we minimally adjust each one depending on our needs. Okay, let me show you an example of what is a good breakdown for a shot like this. So have a look what I've done here. So we are trying to go away from that one big spline that is happening, right? Because that doesn't make sense, because that would have to do more points, and then we would have to start moving those points individually. So what I've done here, and I can guarantee you that I haven't moved a single point. I've drawn these splines. Okay, they have minimal keyframes. They only have the keyframes that are needed, and I haven't moved a single point. I've only moved groups of splines, and I've simply adjusted. So the two main splines that you see here are these two. By the way I check Roto, and this is for me the most important thing. How do you check your edges? How do you check your Roto? For me, this is very simple. Silhouette has Alt-O as this basic alpha change. So I don't use A as the cycle between the alpha. I use the Alt-O, and I've changed that on the key bindings to be just this. So basically what I want to see is foreground with splines, or I want to see the alpha. This is the only thing that I need to do roto. And whenever we're approaching the motion blur subject, you will see why is this the only thing that I need, okay? But for me, it's just this. You go there, and you change the Alt-O on the key bindings to whatever key that you want to use. I even use my controller, and I set the key for that, and this is how I roto, okay? All right, so going back to this, I have these two splines. You see these two splines here, the two splines that I'm moving. Those are the first two that I'm going to be dealing with because those are those two that are going to disappear first. See, when I'm moving, those two splines will disappear. As soon as they go inside, they're no longer used. I don't need to even see them. I can animate the opacity, or I can just leave them where they are. And what we see here is another two levels. There's one bump over here, and there's another bump over there. Okay? And this is where you start seeing that your breakdown is going to give you so much more flexibility. Look at how this spline over here moves to the side because it has just a different feeling, a different parallax. Okay? How different is that? And how simple it is to follow these edges by just simply breaking down this into several splines instead of having one big one with all of these inflections that you have to constantly adapt throughout the frame range. How would those edges look whenever you're trying to look at your alpha? How is it possible to keep this nice moving edge, that reveals detail over there? That wouldn't be possible if you are doing this with just one big spline, okay? It's what we call wobbling or boiling. That is guaranteed the problem. And for me, you will always use as many splines as needed, okay? If there is a piece of cloth that needs 100 splines, I will use 100 splines, okay? And I'll move them together in groups without any problems, okay? So around here, I would definitely use one, and I would use another, okay? At least two splines. And you can never judge that by just looking at one frame. So I would look at where it looks the most weird shape. And sometimes those splines will stretch, okay? See here? It's much easier to represent, okay? One of the most important things for me that Silhouette brings to the table is about corner pinning. Whenever I'm doing a spline like this, I never go and I start by editing the points. Okay, I never do this. I always start by this overall reshape tool, and if I can move the whole shape, good. If I can rotate the shape, even better. Definitely scaling it whenever you have something getting closer to you or further away. If your camera is moving or if your object is moving, start by scaling it. So at least you got the scale correct. And then what you can start doing it is actually corner pinning. Okay, so you use this and you'll start corner pinning. This corner pin is an absolute must. There's other packages that try to corner pin, and you are corner pinning this edge and you are destroying the other edge, which is absolutely crazy. It drives me insane. This is by far the best corner pinning tool that allows me to quickly shape and keep the integrity of my spline without destroying too much of what is happening around. Okay, so I always use as a rule of thumb, move groups of splines together. Okay, move always groups of splines together whenever you are trying to get something done. Move them together. I use my arrow keys or our shift arrow keys to do quick movements or small movements. Okay, and then I try to adapt to choose a nice pivot point that I can use to scale and to rotate these images. These splines. Okay, if I can scale it a little bit, if I can rotate them a little bit, I'll do it. And after that, it's all about corner pinning. Okay, just press that Alt button, go to one of the corners and adjust. Because by doing this, you are keeping the integrity of those two splines. They will go together, they will move together, and it's much easier to control. By the end, you go, and if there's like a little shift in one of them, you do a little shift, a little slide with the splines. Okay, after you move them together, you go to individual splines, and only, and this, I mean, it's quite rare that you have to do it. You go into the reshape tool and you start moving 1 point. Okay, that is the moment when you've just ran out of options and you start moving 1 point. Okay, so this is the rule of thumb for doing any kind of good spline breakdown. Okay, so that is step number 2. Okay, which is pretty much breaking down spline.
Before we move any further, though,
sure.
Like how long would you spend like analyzing a shot before you start doing any work on the roto? Before you start putting down that first shape? How many times you bouncing that shot back and forth?
If you're not spending 10 minutes on it, if you're not spending even 5 minutes on it, you're not doing it correctly. Okay, it's not possible for you to look into all of those details, start thinking about strategies of how to track this. That's like a big topic on how to track this. Am I going to use a mocha track? Am I going to use the match move camera and extract some corner pins out of triangulating this, or reconcile some of this information and bring it back into Silhouette to have those static objects already sorted? If you haven't spent 10 minutes in looking at the shot and figuring out the game plan, there's something wrong. You are jumping the gun, and you will realize that the problems are going to be there later.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I see. Like the biggest mistake that I see people doing all the time when they're first starting out is just wanting to dive into it, and then maybe a couple of hours later they realize actually those 5 minutes extra they spent at the beginning would have saved them so much more time towards the end, because they've got to just peel back and redo like a ton of shapes again, because they've just got themselves in a complete mess.
They will cost you a few hours, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, the thing that I just want to underline, because it's so important, is what you just showed there, the working from big to small. And as soon as you get to that control point thing, you've got no other options, because you always start with group, come down to the spline, and then you're manipulating the spline, distorting into place if you possibly can, because if you're every time you touch a control point, you run the risk of just ruining the animation and the flow of the animation when that shot starts moving.
Pretty much, you will start destroying it. You will start creating those wobbles, right? Those big problems when you have to inflect. Doing an inflection within a spline, it's kind of very difficult. It's like back in the day when I started to do this. Sometimes I had a node for a wobble, and I had to literally delete the whole group of splines, or one big spline that I had in there, and divide it in a few more. So I started to understand that, well, if I divide it right in the beginning, I'm going to have my problem solved. So I'll divide more. I'll divide to whatever makes sense. Sometimes people divide it in too many splines that don't make sense. If it's just one edge and you can describe it with the least amount of points, you just have to know how to draw that spline. Let me show you what I could do by breaking down something in too many splines that don't make sense. For instance, if I want to describe this edge over here, I could just go and saying, okay, so this is a bit, and this is another bit. Okay. This just means that it's just too many points in there. Look at that. It's completely pointless, completely pointless to do something like this. Why would you even describe a spline like this by just drawing so many? It's like, if you can just do it with 1 point in the middle. I usually start with 4 points, and if I can, I'll just keep them as simple as possible, simplifying, taking those capabilities of that B spline to be shown. Look at this, how clean that edge is. I don't have any more points in there, and I have full control over this spline by just simply corner pinning it. I can turn this big spline that describes that edge into something as small as this. If I just want to keep that edge in that little corner over there, I can do it. So I have full control with almost no points at all. So it's all about the decisions, the choices that you have that will make your life easier or more complicated across a time. So for me, every little bump that I see in there, I can describe with a spline, and then I'll combine them all together and I move them.
Well, when because there's a really nice question popped up in chat now,
Sure.
especially when we're starting to deal with lots of splines. I mean, what naming convention do you have when you're dealing with this? Do you keep them all as untitled spline 1?
I like to do it in separating in layers, right? In groups that are logical. Like if you're doing a hand, just put everything and call it a hand. What I don't expect people is to describe within one hand, like the 3 splines that define the finger and which finger it is. I think that's counterproductive. Ideally, in an ideal utopia, sure, we could do that. In reality, we don't have time to do that. As long as we separate these things into logical groups, especially when you have to separate things in depth. Sometimes we are separating the hand from the body because it has a different depth and has to have, or even if it's defocused, we will have to export it in a different channel. So the compositor can treat the edges in 2 different ways. Okay, so that is the logical separation that we do. It's usually based on, first, the separation that compositing needs, and that will be the object of our render. And second, if we can separate like the head from the ears, and that'll be more than enough. Okay, I don't see usually a problem of having 20, 40 splines in one layer, because they are all quickly identified by just turning on and off that layer and working with just what we need.
I mean, with color coding as well, is that something you would do to mark out areas?
For sure.
Yeah.
We usually start with trying to have different colors whenever we are doing the roto. We start with different colors. Try to avoid black because it blends very nicely with the edges. So you should have something that pops. But by the very end, what we like to do is whenever we have those channels selected, let's say we want the head in the red channel, and the ears on the green channel, and the body on the blue, we try to select all the splines and give them the color of the channel. So at least the compositor, whenever the compositor gets the shot, it looks very pretty whenever they are comping it. If they are using the splines, it will look very pretty.
I mean, especially with the newest version of Silhouette also being able to take out cryptomats as well as an option based off of colors and things. So
very interesting.
That's another reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we've got tons more stuff to get to. If you've got time, Carlos,
Sure.
But I want to give away some stuff because this is the favorite part of the job. So let's come back to Mission Control for a second. You're watching Boris FX Live. We are talking in depth about the art of roto, and I'm loving every second of it. If you are loving it as well, don't be afraid to hit that little thumbs up button on YouTube for me. It will give you a sense of warmth and pride. We've still got some other stuff coming up, quite a lot of stuff coming up. We're going to be breaking down a bit more, but I want to come down and give away a license of Silhouette, if that's possible. So let's roll the tombola, because one lucky person is going to be walking out with a 1-year subscription of Silhouette, and that person is Jennifer Jacobs. Jennifer Jacobs, congratulations! You have won the 1-year subscription to Silhouette. How did Jennifer do it? Well, it's no secret. All she did is go to borisfxlive.com. She scrolled down to the bottom of the page. She found a lovely little entry form into our competition. She typed in her name and details, and all of a sudden she was one copy of Silhouette heavier as she walked out of the stream. I've kind of lost my train of thought. All I want to say is we still have a copy of the Boris FX Suite to give away. If you want to win it, you better go to borisfxlive.com. So Boris FX Suite is everything we make, including Silhouette, Mocha Pro, Sapphire, Continuum, and Optics, of course. So there's still time, a very small amount of time, to come in and join your entry into the hundreds of entries we already have. So we're going to be giving away that at the end of the stream. If you are wanting to see more of this sort of stuff, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on YouTube. If you're more of a Discord person, then I'm going to show you a little QR code to join the Boris FX Discord server. It's right over here. Let's see if I got the right corner this time. I certainly did. Look at that. So Brian's going to keep that on the screen for a little while. Take out your little phone, scan the QR code, join the Discord server. We do have a full URL which we will drop into the chat in just a moment. But I just want to say thanks everyone for joining us so far. We've still got some more stuff to come, and let's see what that is. Let's return to our guests, Carlos and Marco. Hello everyone. Are you still there? He says, crossing fingers.
Still here.
Still here. There we go. Excellent.
I hope I'm not getting anyone bored with these things. Like the topics will get a bit more controversial from now onwards. But I hope that people are not getting bored with this and they are learning something along the way. This shot here again, our lovely R2D2, a little training shot that I used for my students. And look at this. People, one of the most usual things that I see when people are starting to do Roto is that they will start on frame 1 and they will do 5 in 5 or 10 in 10. Okay, that's a classic way of doing Roto. And they do believe that if you do 5 in 5, you will get enough keyframes to start laying out that object. It's the first step of drafting your Roto. Well, you couldn't be more wrong. Each time I see 5 in 5 or 10 in 10, I know that trouble is coming. And why is that? Well, because we follow animation rules. Pretty much what you have to start looking here is what are the key poses of your object. Okay, and how to lock that spline until the next movement happens. So if I look at the R2D2's foot right here, and I try to figure out by just observing, again, it's just observing, what I see here is that there are like minimal movements on the first few frames. Okay, and all those movements will have to be keyed, but then there is a moment where it starts lifting from the ground. Okay, and that lift from the ground is going to have to be keyframed and has a moment where it stops, which is right here. Okay, so that is going to be one of your key poses, and going backwards, that is going to be another one of your key poses. So if you keep doing this and you keep identifying this is a key pose, and then it moves back down again, and that is another key pose. Okay, if you keep doing this and keyframing your objects based on those key poses, you will be able to establish what is your base level draft for your Roto. Okay, I'm not looking initially at minimal movements, micro movements. I'm looking at those big key moments, inflection points across the timeline. See, it touches the ground. Where it touches the ground, it's going to be here. So you keyframe over here. And then what happens? We're going to a few more frames, and it twitches a little bit. I don't care about those little twitches. Let's see when it lifts again. Okay, it's going to be, let's see if there is, there's a movement. Okay, so there's a big movement over here. So before a big movement, what we do, we keyframe it again to lock that spline in there. We keyframe it, so basically it has a starting point and an end point. That's the whole thing about keyframing. So you see that the object is starting to move, you're going to lock it before. and then it moves. Okay, and then here you can start searching for where is that object going. It's probably going off screen. Okay, so you will follow it until it goes off screen, and you can usually, when it goes off screen, what you try to do is you try to use a keyframe before it goes off. So at least you know that before it goes off, you can keyframe it, and then carry on that movement and move that spline off screen. Why is that important? Motion blur. That's going to be the big topic of the day. Okay, so keyframing, I don't want to spend too much time in here, but just to tell you guys that keyframing, you should see the keyframes of the initial draft all spread across the timeline. If you started work and you're just working on the first 10 frames and getting those 10 frames perfect, you are losing too much time. Okay, so first of all, give that nice range of movement across the timeline. Okay, at least to have the initial draft, that's those first key poses of your objects, and then you can go back and start identifying what are the little micro movements that you have. So, since here, like you see those like little things that happen, little twitches that happen, something like this, it has to be keyframed. Something as simple as this. There's no way that we won't lay a keyframe here, okay? There's no way that we won't lay a keyframe there as well. But is this part of the initial pass? No. We leave this for a second pass, okay? And this is how we refine our roto. We start with big movements and we go back down to small movements, okay? Of course, all of this can be tracked or not. Tracking can be your best friend and can also be your worst enemy. Okay, I've seen people getting so attached to tracking that when the tracking is doing something crazy and destroying the splines, they still try to fix the tracker. And sometimes it's as simple as, well, use the tracker just with position. Don't use the scale and rotation, because those are the ones that have introduced more problems. Or if you can use the translation and rotation, don't use the perspective change, because that it will introduce a bit more issue as well. So that's when we start being smart and saying that tracking can take us further, but maybe won't take us to the finish line. Okay, you will use it until it helps you, and maybe you can take it halfway through and say, okay, from here onwards, I'll do it manually because I can actually have more control without destroying my splines. Okay, so this is my approach to all the tracking issues. Okay, and Silhouette is amazing in terms of tracking, even point tracking, amazing. And then the introduce of Mocha's planar tracker is an absolute perfection happening in there. Is the perfect symbiosis. Now, the next topic that I would like to talk about is the hot topic of the day, and probably the most controversial thing that happens within the Roto community, which it has to do with motion blur. Okay, how do we approach a Roto shot? What kind of standard do we use? And I know at least some 6 different ways of doing Roto, that different companies will ask for different things. Okay, different schools will teach different ways, and usually people get very confused, especially when you are an artist and you're trying to establish yourself as an artist and trying to figure out what is the best practices, and then you go to a place and then they ask you something different. I would say again that there are preferences, there are personal preferences that you can have, and then there is productivity and financial consequences to those preferences. Okay, so usually, what are the 2 main discussions, 2 big groups of what we do? Do we roto to the motion blur, and we match photographically what is on the plate, or do we roto to what is considered the hard edge? Do you guys have any opinions on that before we start? Ben and Marco?
I do the edge, the real edge, or the edge minus the motion blur.
So you go hard edge, right?
Yeah.
You go hard edge.
Yeah.
Ben, what would you do? Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
I'm muted. I muted myself.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. It was me. It was 100% me. I leaned on a button. No, I always I hate changing the shape itself. I keep for the the object edge, and then work with it afterwards to figure out the motion blur on top of that. I'm not a big shrinky growy person. Hang on, don't take that out of context. Hang on.
So so you see here, like even between us, we're just three people here. We already seen two different ways of doing this, and this clearly transposes to the whole community. All right, now let's figure out not just the preference, the personal preference, but actually what are the consequences in terms of productivity. Okay, that's what I want to focus, so people can understand how can they choose, if they have the capability of choosing, or at least to understand what's going to be the difference. So I have here 3 shots of something very simple, just a ping pong ball. Okay, just a ping pong ball moving from one side to the other. This is a 180-degree shutter. I also have a 90-degree shutter over here that you will see has a bit less motion blur. It's more stroby, if you can see it. And then I have a 360 motion blur shutter, and that one you'll see that is like super draggy, like the motion blur is big. Okay, I'm going to use a traditional 180 for us to start talking about it. Okay, so what is the usual discussion here? Everyone agrees that we start rotoing on a sharp edge, on a sharp frame, a frame where the object is stopped, or the camera has stopped, and we can clearly see the size of this object. And the size of this object is clearly a ball, right? It's a round ball. So I've done this spline over here. Okay, and this spline here represents my object. Now the question comes, whenever we're trying to go to a frame that has, motion blur, something like this. Okay, so this is going to be a constant speed. Okay, like at this point, I try to keep it as a constant speed. It's a bit wobbly up and down, but we can see here that this is pretty much a constant speed. And what happens is that with my spline, whenever it goes into an extreme motion blur, and that completely depends on the speed that we're going, we will see our hard edge going inside, and we will have our soft edge going outside. Okay, and if I could try to show you how does that spline now interacts with this, like this spline was the one that I did in the beginning, right? Look at this spline. This spline no longer matches one or the other edge. Okay, so as Marco's preference, and as a lot of people's preference as well, what we would have to do in this case, and I'm going to just pull another roto here, another roto node around here. I would have to start rotoing this edge instead. Okay, the so-called hard edge. Okay, roughly. Let's put let's not talk about perfection of this spline, but you get the idea. Okay, so if I change my spline to actually move from whatever shape it was, the original shape, to a hard edge, I'm going to have to be constantly changing the size of this. And remember, if we were going 3 times faster, what would happen is the hard edge would be like this. If we would go 10 times faster, the hard edge would go like that. If we would go 20 times faster, there was no hard edge. And my question here for you guys and for the audience would be, what does it happen when we don't have any hard edge left? Where do you put your splines? What happens?
You outsource that clip.
It's a big issue, right?
Oh, dear.
Because this happens constantly. We see this every single shot. There's a hand moving, and that hand is moving so fast that everything is transparent. There is not a single pixel that is solid. So you cannot put the spline in there. So what do? You turn it off. But what about the representation of that transparency? Like, how you will ever be able to do this? Okay, it's not possible. It just falls over there. But now comes the question: is why do we need that hard edge? It's like people ask me sometimes, why is this discussion? Why are so many compositors obsessed with that hard edge? Well, it's very simple. Because whenever you are trying to comp a shot, let me share my screen again. If I show you a shot like this with our R2D2, and we go over here, when you have motion blur like that, okay, you have transparency over an edge, right? Look at that. There's transparency over an edge. So when people are trying to get rid of that color checker, they're going to have to replace the background, right? They want to use the roto to cut out to the last solid pixel that they can identify, okay? Because they want to get rid of everything that is there. Okay, so that's why you need that hard edge to cut out through the last solid pixel that doesn't include this kind of situation over here, which is a bit of transparency. So you want to go to here, which there is no transparency at all, and you want to be able to pre-mult that information. Okay, so we got until there. We all agree we need to have that hard edge version. Okay, so what about the motion blur? Well, what happens in a situation like this is that in terms of compositing, you pre-mult it with a hard edge version, but then you're going to extrude those edges with any of the procedural tools that happen. And now I know that that Silhouette also has included some kind of edge extrude for your tools. I don't know the name, exactly the name. You called it in Paint or something like that. I think something like that for your paint module, and with that you can extrude those edges, and then you get back to a land where you don't have that background anymore. But now what do you need? Now you need the motion blur matte, so you can pre-mult it again, and you bring back the softness of that matte. Okay, same thing would happen here. If you look at this, I can even use the 360 version of this shot, and you will see how fast this motion blur goes. Look at that. Look at how small that hard edge is. So now imagine that I use the hard edge version, and then I extrude it back, so I remove everything that is behind, all the background that is behind, and then I will pre-mold it again using the perfect motion blur version, so you get rid of all of your background, and you get this. Now people say, well, but then how do we do this? How if you can only have one or the other? You can only roto to the hard edge, or you can have the motion blur. But if you have the motion blur version, you will never get the hard edge. Well, that's not true. The only thing that we need to do is to gamma down a motion blur version. We just need to gamma down a motion blur version, and you will get rid of all transparent pixels, and you get your hard edge version for free. Okay, this is what I consider the $1 million lesson. If you do the roto to the motion blur, you get the hard edge for free. So you get everyone happy. You get the guys that rightfully so need the hard edge to do their edge extrudes and get rid of the backgrounds. And you get the perfect motion blur for you, so you can pre-mult it again and get the perfect integration with any kind of background that you want to use. Okay? So how do we do this? This is very simple. Okay? This is rule number one of any kind of roto to motion blur. Okay? Your original shape never changes. Okay? Unless the object is rotating, unless the object is getting closer to you, In this case, nothing of that is happening. This is just a sideways movement. You keep the exact same object throughout the whole frame range. How convenient is that? I no longer have to keyframe almost every single frame, because you know that the motion blur here, look, it's just very little. So I would have to do a keyframe over here to do that hard edge. But then the next one is a bit bigger. So I need to keyframe it again, and keyframe it again, and keyframe it again, and keyframe it again. Pretty much, if there's any kind of acceleration, you're going to have to keyframe it every single frame. Okay? So what I'm saying is, do not keyframe every single frame. You just need to move your object around as it is. Don't change the shape. And you're going to position it halfway through the hard edge and the soft edge. Okay? Halfway through. This is very simple. Now, people go here and say, okay, I'm laying a keyframe over here. Let me look at the motion blur. Let me even say here. Let's see. Okay, I'm laying out. I'm like halfway through this way here. Okay, halfway through. Top and bottom, there's no motion blur because it's going sideways. Let's look at how it looks. Oh, it's wrong. I've seen people saying Silhouette cannot do motion blur. Look at this. This is wrong. Silhouette cannot handle motion blur. So we have to go back to the hard edge version. This is wrong. You can never judge a frame by just one keyframe because you don't have enough context. Where is the spline going next? Oh, the spline is not going anywhere because I haven't done any other keyframe. Where's the spline is going before? Well, the spline is going before. It's not on the right place because I don't have enough information on the keyframes because it's still an accelerated movement. So I might need a separation, at least one more keyframe somewhere in the middle where it shifts the most to have a proper context. So people are looking at here and saying the motion blur doesn't match. The motion blur on the frame doesn't match. On the next frame doesn't match either. How do I solve this? It's very simple. You go to the following frame, okay, and you lay down your object. You go to the previous frame and you lay down your object. And you do not judge those outside frames, okay? They are until you have the object moving across the whole frame range, and this is so important why we did that, the initial draft. Remember the initial draft that I was talking about? That's why you have to have your object moving throughout the whole frame range. Because once you have that initial draft, you already solved this problem. You no longer need to be putting a frame before and a frame after because your object, it might need just 2 or 3 keyframes across the whole frame range to be sorted. But now, the thing that I want you to see is that once we are here and we gave them a context of what is ahead and behind, look at this. We have a perfect motion blur. It's matching the hard edge. It's matching the soft edge. The hard edge and the soft edge. Look at that. How perfect is that? What did I change? Nothing. Nothing special. I just gave it context. Okay? And I'm just judging what I can. So now what I would do is like literally spread out my keyframes throughout the frame range. You know, look at this. This is a deceleration movement. I know, and it's going a bit wobbly up and down. So I know that around here, I'm going to have to definitely spread some keyframes because it's accelerated movement. And then around the middle, I might not even need to give him a context of what is ahead and behind because it's already following nicely with a nice spread of keyframes, okay? So look at here, this is the one that I've done before. Look at that. Absolutely perfect, okay? Now, for you to have a perfect motion blur, you need to know how to use the settings, okay? So on your object, you need to turn on the motion blur, okay? Turn on the motion blur. Remember, spline always halfway through the hard edge and the soft edge. So turn on the motion blur, and on the node, you have your motion blur that has to be enabled. And these settings over here, shutter angle and phase, have to match perfectly what is your photography. This means that these two settings are always together. Like they should be in a 99.999 of the situations. They have to be linked, okay? You guys could even link those together because one is going to be the shutter and the other one is going to be the center of your shutter. This means that for this shot, I have 180 degrees. If I change this for the next shot, that would be the 90. I have to change my shutter to 90 and my phase to minus 45. Okay, minus half of that. And look at what happened here. My motion blur has gone to half. Okay, which means my hard edge is going more closer to the spline, and my soft edge is also going to the spline, but still in the middle, always in the middle. No matter what you do, your spline will never change. Okay, so whenever you don't have access to this motion blur information, because the client didn't give you that information, you can start extrapolating by this. You know that the spline is on the right place. You look at this, you check your alpha, and you know that something is not right? Like this is like 90 degrees is not really matching my motion blur. So you just go to your settings and adjust it, 180 and minus 90. Recently, what we've seen is like Alexa cameras, they go 172.8. And that gives 86.5 negative on the phase, okay? So it has to match perfectly for this to work, okay? You are seeing a little bit of banding. It's something that whenever I'm working, I'm not so worried because this just gives me an information about where is the motion blur starting and ending. But whenever you're rendering, for sure, you should come here and increase this to 32, 64. Okay, very important, so you don't see that banding whenever you are rendering those mattes. Okay, but this will make your computer slower. Okay, so you can even use this, or you can even go to something as simple as 2. If you have 2 samples, you have your hard edge and your soft edge. Pretty much that. So if you want to check your roto, that will still work. Okay, and this is everything that you need to know about motion blurred roto. There is no question. You have way less keyframes because you are not changing. I haven't changed a single shape, right? A single point. I haven't changed anything. So I only have position keyframes. Only position keyframes. And this is how simple roto can be if people know how to do this. And by having way less keyframes, I'm going to do this faster. And in terms of production, this is going to be way cheaper to do because I can do a roto to the motion blur in literally half or a third of the time that you can do a roto to the hard edge. Guaranteed. Okay? Guaranteed. Because every single spline to the hard edge moving in a different direction, an object moving or a body, you will have to change those hard edges every single frame. And I don't have to. I just need to give him like the general real shape that the object would have if the shutter was infinitely fast. Okay, and that's the position where it is. Where is the object? Okay, it's going to be there, and I can get it. I can get the hard edge for free because I just go into your preferred compositing package and you just gamma down that matte, and you will get all of that information for free. Okay, simple as that. Gamma down, you get the hard edge. Gamma up, you get the soft edge. Don't gamma, you have the motion blur version. Okay, the only thing you cannot have is if you turn off the motion blur, the spline will not match anything. Okay, the spline will be in the middle. Okay,
that's the great trick that you've got there. That really is because there's a lot of stuff kicking off in chat, and Paul Miller was saying. Like right at the very start, he said, you want to be rotoing to the middles, and then exactly. All of a sudden, as you were sort of just getting into there, it's like, yes, he was right. You go into the middles.
There is. Sure. Tell me.
I've just got one really really quick thing though, because you were when you were playing around with the motion blur in the controls and looking at the matte there's actually a feature that I think was dropped into Silhouette 2020, which is the roto overlay mode. So if you have the roto overlays turned on, there's actually a special overlay for motion blur, so you can have a little look at just the spline. So you actually get the splines will show up for the hard edge and the soft edge and the middles.
Beautiful.
So you can there's no guesswork about it. You can just go in there and clinically find out where the motion blur actually is meant to be.
And
is
the
beautiful.
benefit of that,
great technique.
I was going to say the benefit of that is going to be that especially if you have a lot of shapes with a lot of motion blur, you can be in input, viewing the input rather than the output of the roto node, and then you don't have a speed hit by having the motion blur on. So you can you can visualize that motion blur without the drawback of all the extra processing time.
That is amazing. You can keep being on the foreground mode and having just your splines without having to calculate that motion blur. That is absolutely perfect.
That's it, because someone was just asking whether the roto overlay, gave any sort of performance hit. It's actually the exact opposite. It's giving you a performance boost because you don't have to calculate all of the motion blur overlay. You're actually just seeing it happen, in a spline by itself. So, that's a lot easier to work with. Yeah.
Well, we had an interesting feature request related to this, which was a particular customer outsourced a lot of their roto, and some houses roto on the hard edge, some in the middle, some on the outside. They wanted a way to easily slide it back and forth over all the keyframes, so that it didn't matter what way in which it was rotoed, but you'd be able to change it later. So it's something that's been requested.
Pretty impossible, right? It's pretty impossible. Once you start changing the shape of your object, you can never ever get a good motion blur. And that is where the roto to the hard edge falls like deeply, is that you can only get hard edge. As soon as you turn on motion blur, we know that the motion blur is going to go inside and out. So if your splines are already inside, your hard edge is going to go even more inside. So this is where what happens when the companies use hard edge roto. They usually fall into painting edges back into the BG prep department or the roto paint department after the comp is done. Okay, that is one of the consequences, and has a big financial consequence for this, because you can no longer get that motion blur right. Someone is going to pay for the audacity of this choice, and most of the times is usually even compositors saying is like, oh, I prefer the hard edge version. Well, it's very simple, that you only prefer the hard edge version because you were not given the choice of having both. Okay, having the hard edge for free and having the motion blur perfect in there waiting for you to do perfect edge integration. And usually when I explain this to people, they go like, oh yeah, I actually prefer that. Again, it's just the choice has to be an informed choice. You cannot just say I prefer this one, but you never tried the other one, or no one ever showed you what are the benefits of having the other version. If you can do it faster, you can have more quality. This is going to mean you go home earlier. The shot is going to be cheaper, so the company is good. The client's going to be happy because the shot is cheaper as well. It's a win-win-win-win-win situation, right?
Well, I've got one last little question for you with regards to motion blur, and this is something that happens. Actually, it's very, very common, because you're not always starting with an object that's still, with something that's got no motion blur at the very start, or ending again with an object that's still. So how are you dealing with the motion blur at the before the beginning of the shot and the end of the shot? I mean, what
you mean?
trick can you show for that?
It's an object that went outside of the range of the frame, right? Let's say,
yeah,
let me show
so basically, if you've got a shot from 50 to 75, but what's happening? Yeah, exactly. Something, or
here,
maybe
right?
even. Well, no, like something even better than that. Like say we cut here. The shot actually cuts here.
Yeah.
What are you going to do if you don't have a frame afterwards to make sure that you've got the proper...
Rule number one, we always include an extra frame at the head and at the tail of the shot to be able to deal with exactly those situations. So in a situation like this, like imagine that this is the end of the shot, I would include an extra frame over here, and I would move the spline a bit more, and it's a complete guesswork. So you have to look at the position, like the speed that you are moving your splines, and you would move that into a position that gives you an accurate result on the previous frame. Okay? Guaranteed. That this is like one of the first things that we teach to every junior and every intern is like always give one more frame, like a shadow frame or a ghost frame to your shots. One in the beginning, one in the end, exactly because of that. Because you will always need to move a little bit to give that first or last frame motion blur the right shape. Okay.
So Carlos,
Perfect.
just a point there. A couple things we did in Silhouette for that particular case is that you can change your working range to be an extra frame on either side, and add an extra keyframe beyond it, regardless of whether or not there's a source clip there or not. That's number one. And number two, you can extrapolate the motion on the last keyframe and the beginning keyframe so that the same motion expands outward on both ends. Might not be quite exact where your method of adding that extra keyframe and getting it exactly right may be needed depending on the motion, but those are a couple things you can do without having that extra frame at the beginning and the end if you don't have it.
Yeah. Having the curve, right? The curve to continue, the motion of that spline will continue. And have the whatever was the movement that object was going, it will going to carry on like that. That will definitely give you a very close approximation of how it will be. It all depends on if the object is accelerating or not, but that would give you a really good point to start at. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that happens here, and we've seen like a big trend, is people doing what we call swap splines or one frame splines, which is whenever you cannot really represent the motion blur, you don't know what to do, or maybe you are even putting splines at the hard edge, and then the motion blur is not matching. And you have to render with the motion blur. So what usually people try to do is like they create one more frame in the beginning, one more frame in the end, the same way that I was showing you how to do that ping pong ball. You know, they do that for every single frame, and they turn it off at the handles, and they just keep the spline in the middle visible. Every single frame, they do this. Hundreds of splines created every single frame, and this is when people don't understand what they're doing, you know, and usually this turns a nightmare in terms of fixing, and if we want to do like a little changes in comp or whatever, if we want to use the splines, by any means impossible to use the splines. If we want to change it in-house like something, it's impossible to do it. So it's zero tolerance, to be honest, to spline swapping. It's just not doable. Like we don't want to see that, because it's we would rather spend time training people and explaining them how to use these things the best way, understand the theory, which is software agnostic, but using Silhouette you'll get there much closer because all the tools are ready for you. It's like literally spoon feeding you everything that you need to know. There is, though, one situation where, again, you have to understand what is happening in there. And we approached this the other day when we were preparing this session, which is retimes. Okay, let me try to explain you this in 2 minutes. Whenever you have a shot that is retimed, I actually have it here. Guess what? I guess I prepared this. So let's look at this shot. This is the same 180-degree shutter. And this is my Roto. This shot was retimed to twice the speed. Okay? So whenever you retime twice the speed, you are dropping every other frame. Okay? So you're not doing any kind of motion flow interpolation or anything. You're just dropping frames. Let's say you have frame 1, 2, 3, and 4. You drop 2 and 4. So you have 1 and 3 now renamed to 1, 1, and 2. Okay, so they go back to back, but we just drop the frames in the middle. So what happens with the retimes is very simple. We can retime this as fast as we want. But the thing that will not ever change is the photography. So the photography is going to be set. And the motion blur that you have on a retimed shot is the motion blur of 180 degrees. Independent of if you move this faster 10 times or 100 times, the motion blur of the single frame that you are keeping will always be 180. Okay, this will never change. So what happens here is, if I'm trying to represent this shot, the motion blur, because the splines are moving faster than what my photography is in reality, the motion blur is going to be the double. Look at that. The motion blur, of course, because my splines are moving faster, the computer believes that, okay, if you are moving at this speed, I need to give you this amount of motion blur. Good. But our photography says, oh, actually, what I have in there is a 180 degree. So it's not photographically correct, but it's what we have. So we have to match this. How to match this? Very simple. You have an inverse proportional to do. So in this case, if I'm going twice as fast, I have to reduce my shutter in half. So again, you go to this spline, you go to your node, open the motion blur, and choose it instead of 180. Remember, twice the speed. You're going twice the speed. So 90, and your phase minus half of that, minus 45. Look at that. Perfect motion blur. Perfect retimed motion blur. Okay? Now, the interesting thing is, this is going at twice the speed, right? What if we have a ramp? What if we have suddenly like going 1 times the speed, then goes to 2, then ramps up to 5, then goes back to 2? What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to animate. You're going to have to animate this motion blur. That's the only situation where you ever animate. This is why you have these little clocks over there. You can animate this. And you can even script this in a way that you pick up your curve that you are using from Match Move or Layout or whoever's department that is exporting you a retime curve, and you can even plug it in, ideally, requests to Marco. How could we plug in those retime curves straight away? Having like a text file or something that we could plug it in straight away for these retime shots, and it would give us the perfect shutter angle and shutter phase based on that retime curve. Okay, so this is the only situation where you have to break the rules and animate the shutters. Okay, do never animate shutters and phases whenever there's no retime. You should be able to choose the value that matches the photography. Okay, and I don't know.
That's a brilliant tip. I think that's so good. Because we were talking about this the other day, and it suddenly clicked why those stopwatches would ever be needed. It's like I just thought, okay, well that's something that I've never done. And then like retimed shots, of course, any time ramping, it's gonna be useful. Exactly.
Break the motion blur, right?
Oh no, that's yeah, exactly. I mean that's brilliant, Carlos. I mean I know we are running really long. We've gone really long. I've still got a copy of the Boris FX Suite to give away. I've got 2 really quick hardware questions if you've got time for them.
Sure.
And one of them is about your little not MIDI deck thing. What's it called? The I've forgotten the name of it.
Toolbox.
Yeah, that's it.
This little thing over here.
Like, because that's the one. Because I'm a very tactile person as well. If there was a way of extending that out with actual MIDI controllers, so you had like 15 twiddly knobs you could press, would that be something that you would be interested in?
Absolutely. This is why that's the reason why I got this, because I was doing the same thing that this is doing with another MIDI controller and having that MIDI translated into keystrokes. But this one gives me a lot more flexibility. Let me tell you what I do. What I do here, I have this wheel over here that controls my timeline. So I have it mapped to X and Z. I control my timeline. I can press the knob, and it will play the shot or stop the shot. Then I have here my alpha. So whenever I'm trying to change between foreground and output mode, just to check the alpha, I have this button over here. Then I have this one here, which is to frame the shot, F, mapped to F. Then I have these two little buttons over here. I have this mapped to T and R. Basically, our transform and reshape tools. And if I use the modifier button, because all of these is going to be Shift and Alt, I can use combinations of this and change this into W and E. That's basically pretty much our rotation and scale tools. So I literally avoid using the left side of my keyboard by using my left hand on this, and I can do pretty much everything that I need to do productively within Silhouette. I have everything mapped to this, and you can use this in multiple softwares. It will change straight away. It has an amazing software, changes straight away to other things. And pretty much you can use the same deal with any kind of MIDI controller. But just this one was made for this, made for editing. One of the things that I have also mapped here is going to be our spline visibility. We have some internal scripts that allows us to add spline visibilities, and also deleting keyframes on the fly, adding keyframes and deleting keyframes on the fly without having to go into the timeline and choosing the little keyframe and then delete. I can add and delete keyframes over here, and I can change the visibility, add visibility keyframes over here as well. So as you're seeing, like it's a bit of a geeky land that is happening over here. But once you set this up, and it's just everything becomes so much faster, because I can just quickly go through my shot over here and have quick actions that I do usually with my keyboard, but having a different interaction. Like I'm a bit of a geek with these things, man.
Well, I've got a similar thing that I'm holding in my hand at the moment. If we cut to me, this is the little control that I have with my Cintiq. So I've got the same sort of thing. So the Wacom Cintiq comes with this little bad boy, and
nice.
That does the whole thing, the same sort of thing for me. So you can sort of just be twiddling around, and it becomes so intuitive to not have to, put your hand down on a keyboard or ever look down again, because you're just working with the right hand and then doing all the control stuff with the left hand. It's
pretty much Wacom on the right hand, controller on the left hand, and you almost never need to. I might go with my right hand. I might go, and the first thing that is right here is the arrows. So I can nudge splines around. I just use my right hand, and it's right over there, like right close to the Wacom. That's pretty much the only thing that I use nowadays. It's just that. Other than that, I use controllers, and makes things fun. Like people say, "Oh, Roto is boring." It's not boring. First, you need to learn how to do it. Make it a puzzle. Make it fun, and you will see that you will learn a lot by doing Roto. Yeah. Again, it's the best excuse for you to learn compositing, for you to learn visual effects. And to start in this industry.
Well, the final question I've got is actually it's another one that came in on the chat, which is, I need to find it there, exactly what it is. I think it's something about which Wacom tablet are you using, and what size are you using?
This is the Intuos Pro Small. Yeah, Intuos Pro Small. I find it's this one here. I find it's the perfect size for you to keep in your desk and have it mapped to 2 monitors. I would say if you go with a lower budget, you probably will lose a bit in terms of precision, especially when you are trying to paint things in silhouette frame by frame. You will lose a bit of a bit of definition, but it's an entry point. If you can have no tablet or an entry level tablet, go for the entry level tablet, and then eventually you will go and you'll try to spend a bit more on a professional level tablet. But pretty much all the versions of Wacom that I've seen since the beginning of my career, from Intuos to now the latest ones, they all work flawlessly. Honestly, it's a must-have for any compositor, any roto artist, any paint artist to have one of these things. Okay.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I've got one. I know I said that was my final question. This is my absolutely final question. Where can people learn more, and where can people find you?
That's a good question. Okay, so recently I didn't have much time to be training people. So my courses are now what I'm doing right now is training inside company. So we are always looking for people. We're looking for interns. Image Engine is hiring across all departments, to be honest. That's the best place for you to learn right now. My road to comp VFX Academy, it's quite stopped right now, because it usually happens when I'm in between projects. I definitely want to start creating, if there is buzz, for me to start doing some recorded contents. I usually like to train live, but I'm not completely against recording some stuff and starting new courses. Okay, I do believe there is a lot of schools out there teaching compositing. I do believe that they lack in terms of roto and paint. They don't give it enough respect. They don't give it enough value for you to be really good at this, to be a specialist. Okay, so I do believe that to train roto, you have to learn from the best. And I don't know if you have the picture of my team that I sent you. But this group of individuals are all specialists in roto and paint. They are all really focused in training everyone that comes across. We have from absolute seniors to absolute juniors, people that just started a few months ago, and they've just won. We just won an Emmy with the Book of Boba Fett. Okay, so, and all of these people, they share one thing. It's the taste for training, and this is what we do. Okay, so you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. Drop a message if you're interested in some training. I've just launched a new YouTube channel, RTC Roto Labs, where I'm going to be doing a lot of what we've done today and sharing with people what I usually train in between closed doors. That's pretty much what I usually like to do, train within closed doors. And I'm opening up all of this to the community, because I do believe that people have a lot to gain. The community have a lot to gain in understanding all of these things. So in the RTC Roto Labs, I'm now bringing different points of view. I've interviewed Digiprep supervisors, head of compositing and Image Engine as well, Ben. I want to have a chat with Marco as well, and have like a nice chat, just talking about the development of Silhouette and where this is going for the future. So it's all of those little tips and tricks like we've done today that we just literally scratch the surface. In terms of how to be a specialist.
It's ridiculous. The 2 hours has absolutely just flown by, and I know we could. There's still a ton of stuff that we haven't got to or even thought about getting to yet. Carlos, I want to say thank you very much for being a guest with us today. Stick around. Just want to say goodbye properly offline. But for everyone else, we've got our giveaway. So I'm going to say this properly. Carlos Conceição Conceição. There we go. I've got it. Marco Paolini. Thank you very much for joining us here today, both of you. It's been a fascinating conversation. It's been a real pleasure to geek out and talk roto with you and Silhouette.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Carlos.
Alrighty. Well, let's get to our final bit of the show. This is the bit that I love doing as well, which is giving away free stuff. If you've enjoyed everything you've seen up till now, give us a little thumbs up. Think about subscribing to the Boris FX YouTube channel as well. You know, it's all good fun. But for now, let's have a go. Let's see what people have been waiting for. Apart from all the lovely tricks that we've been seeing, we're giving away the Boris FX Suite. That is everything that we make, including Silhouette, Mocha Pro, a Sapphire Continuum, and Optics, and my brain it couldn't decide which of the products I wanted to say in what order. We're giving this away to one lucky winner. All they did was go to borisfxlive.com. Let's see who the winner is. It's going to be none other than Mateus Silva. Mateus Silva, congratulations. You are today's big winner of the Boris FX Suite. It's a 1-year subscription. Everyone who has won today, be it the Wacom tablet, the Silhouette, or the Boris FX Suite, we will be in touch with you in the next 24 to 48 hours to tell you how we are going to give you your prize. Thank you very much. If you haven't won anything today, never fear, we are going to be live again very shortly, and we are going to be rolling that tombola filled with prizes one more time. We have, of course, the next date for our Boris FX Live, but it's a secret. Or is it a secret? I don't know. This is the bit that I forgot to actually ask Brian whether we had a graphic for this. I'm guessing from him shaking his head very, very vigorously in my right ear that we don't have a graphic for this. So the best place to find out when our next Boris FX Live is, where we will be talking with the VFX team, or at least some of the VFX team behind a little film called Avatar: The Way of Water. So we're going to be chatting with them in the next couple of weeks. So to be first to find out when that's going to be, this is when you subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's the best place to be up to date with all of our stuff. Or just go to borisfxlive.com and keep an eye out there. All right. Here is the last chance for now to join our Discord server with the QR code. Just while I'm wrapping everything up, you grab your camera, take a picture of that, and join the Boris FX Discord server. It's new, it's brand new. It launched a couple of days ago, so we'll be happy to see you there. Right, my name is Ben Brownlee. This has been Boris FX Live. Thank you very much again to all of our guests. Thank you very much again to all of our winners and to you for viewing. And I will see you again very shortly. All right, take care. Bye for now.